there is also Jesus, in which the branch we've already looked at as a symbol of the one who will remove sins in a single day, which is pretty fitting of Jesus. He has rebuilt the temple and is rebuilding the temple. And he is the perfect example of a king and high priest in unity. If anyone else is a better example, then I'd like to hear it. So now, we're going to look at a video. Now, first off, I want to say I'm very sorry to those who haven't seen it yet. Has anyone here watched last night's Merlin? Woo. So, for those who don't know me, I am quite a big fan of Arthurian legend, which is where the title of this came from, because The Once and Future King is an Arthurian legend book, if you look it up. And they brought out a while back the TV series Merlin. Oh, they remade it and all that stuff. So inside of it, to give you a basic rundown, the character Merlin is this sorcerer, and there's all sorts of Skype about sorcery being bad and stuff like that. However, he knows that he has a future with this character, Arthur, who is the prince at the time, who could be the king in the future. And so, the future king. So, inside of this scene, it shows the crowning of Arthur. And if that got you interested, it's on again next week on Saturday. Okay. So, inside of that scene, we saw the crowning of Arthur, in which probably not how it happened with Jeshua, and it certainly didn't happen that way with Jesus. But it's still something that should be looked at a bit. And just one of the things that was said inside of that really got me this morning, in which it was how he would rule with mercy, keeping justice over the land, which is what Jesus is going to do, we can hope. It just seems right. So, we've got the now and the future. So, which one's right is the question. Who is it really talking about? Is it talking about the present-day temple, or is it talking about the kingdom of God? And also, who is it talking about the king who's perfectly aligned with God? If we look back to the past of Israel, the Israelites made a lot of mistakes. One of the quite big ones was they started off with judges to reside over the land of Israel and set the laws and keep them in unity with God. However, the Israelites didn't like that. Everyone else was having kings and they wanted to join in the party. So they asked for kings, in which, to be honest, they weren't particularly great for them. If we look at some ones mentioned, I've put down Saul, who was the king before David, who ended up, I think, out of sheer pride, killing a load of his own troops because he didn't want to give them food, because he was told the battle would be done really quickly. And generally, he wasn't a great king. There's also Ahab, who was the king at the time of the prophet Elijah, who was, well, inside of his relationship with his wife, they turned the people of Israel around and turned them to Baal. And through that, God went and caused a famine for 3 years, drought for 3 years even. So he wasn't particularly great for the country. There's Jeroboam, who caused the curse on the kings of Israel when they started off, meaning that they would get a load of bad kings through the time. There's also Babylon. They just got exiled from them, or just got exiled to them, and were having a pretty rough time of it with them. Even though there were things like King Nebuchadnezzar chucking people into a furnace because they wouldn't worship him, which isn't particularly nice. And even their best king, who's David, wasn't really perfect. He made a lot of mistakes in his time too. However, God still gave them another chance. Back to the future. Yeah. So, looking at the future, Zechariah chapter 9, verses 9 to 10. Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and victorious, yet he is humble, riding on a donkey, riding on a donkey's colt. I will remove the battle chariots from Israel and the war horses from Jerusalem. I will destroy all the weapons used in battle, and your king will bring peace to the nations. His realm will stretch from sea to sea and from the Euphrates River to the ends of the earth. And on that day, the Lord their God will rescue his people, just as a shepherd rescues his sheep. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How wonderful and beautiful they will be. The young men will thrive on abundant grain, and the young women will flourish on new wine. Looking at this generally, God has been absolutely furious with the Israelites, yet he's still giving them another chance, which is pretty amazing. And he is extending this chance out to them, and he even has this plan in place with the smiling man who is here. Looking at that passage, it is excessively prophetic. In Mark 11, it's the pretty obvious one. It talks about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on not just a donkey, but a donkey's colt. So it pretty much paints out Jesus perfectly at that moment. It talks of a king bringing peace, which is exactly what Jesus is coming to do. It talks about a shepherd with his sheep, which, if you look all over the teachings of Jesus, there's talks of him being a shepherd, or of shepherds generally. There's lots of shepherds, in which, especially in John 10, there is a talk of a realm that stretches to the end of the earth. And this quote, it's from Matthew 28, verse 20, in which it's Jesus' last words to his followers, in which it's, surely I will be with you always to the end of all things, or in some translations, to the end of the earth, which I quite like. And generally, that passage, if you're not going to read the book generally, read that chapter, because it paints such a good picture of a king, and it paints such a good picture of how we have to live and what's going to happen. It's pretty incredible. So, for a recap, time with God isn't always easy. For example, the Israelites in Babylon, some of them worship God. However, times were still tough. People were still being chucked into furnaces. And it wasn't particularly an amazing time for them then. And it isn't always in life generally. I know times can be really tough at the moment. So, yeah, it's not always easy. In fact, in Zechariah 9, it paints out quite a lot in the middle of it that things will be rough in the middle patch, in the time between the time when the war's won and when it's being fought. However, if one thing's certain in all of this book, it's that God's here and God is coming, and it's going to be incredible, and it is fantastic. But yeah, we're currently in the future times. We're in the time of the King who has come, and yeah, it's just an amazing time. Okay.